everyone, my name is Elliot Tawanda Woninyika and I'm with the Chartered Accountants Academy. Welcome to our revision of the CTA Level 2 and Full-Time 2019 End of Semester 1 examination, specifically paper 1. In this session, I'm going to be discussing with you required age. So from an overall performance perspective, required age was not done well by most of us as we struggled to determine exactly what we're supposed to do to address the problem that has been given to us in this problem. So this revision session is going to largely focus more around one, interpretation of the required, then two, the item that we were then expected to do in being able to come up with a valid solution for the purposes of addressing the required. So we are asked to say with reference to the ZRU offer. So it means whatever you are doing in this required was supposed to be in reference to the information in the case study where the offer from the Zimbabwe Rugby Union was detailed. So specifically, what were you asked to do? Discuss with supporting calculations where the management should accept the prize offer from the Zimbabwe Rugby Union. So, what is the decision we want to make here? Should we accept the prize offer? I think that is very important. So, in other words, as I'm making this decision, I also need to be able to evaluate what is the context within which I am making this decision. So, the first one is the prize offer. Is it a once-off or recurring? Which is very important. So if you go back to the scenario, these guys, the ZRU, they indicate that they are hosting a rugby sevens tournament and they would want to host the South African rugby team and the Kenyan rugby team. And as part of that hosting, they are expected to provide accommodation to these two teams. So from the information provided, I'm sure it was clear that this was a once-off transaction. And the moment I see a once-off transaction and I want to evaluate whether I should accept a price offer, what is my key consideration if I'm asked to look at it with supporting calculations? Am I going to make a profit if I take up this offer? And this profit, how do I determine this profit? Then three, for me to be able to take up this offer, do I have the capacity? So automatically, constrained optimization principles should have come into play. So before I do anything, these guys, they indicated that and they specified the number of rooms that they would want. So it meant that I need to determine what is, did we have, 21st, did we have the capacity to host the two rugby teams? If the answer is yes, then the next step is, am I going to make profits? So in determining profits, the question is, what are the relevant costs? Keyword there is relevant. And within the context of a once-off contract. So it meant that some costs that would ordinarily be relevant for a longer-term decision would be irrelevant for this once-off short-term decision. So effectively, or generally, we know that within the short term, fixed costs are not relevant. So it meant that for me to be able to evaluate whether the price offer from ZRU made sense, I needed to calculate the contribution that I was going to earn from taking up the offer. Am I going to make a positive contribution? If I make a positive contribution, that meant that it was worth a while to accept this price offer from the ZRU. So let's go back to the scenario. I just want to touch on a couple of things that really assisted in what we then expected to do, because some of you failed to identify that they were supposed to calculate the contribution. So definitely whatever we then did was off. Others, we picked out that we were supposed to calculate contribution, but the context that we used was wrong. We failed to pick out that it was a once-off transaction. Decision was based on whether or not we were going to make a profit. We also failed to pick out that capacity. We needed to consider whether we had the capacity. We also failed to pick out that we were supposed to apply relevant costing principles. We then also covered the concept of actual costs and opportunity costs, whereby the opportunity cost would arise if, from my capacity evaluation, I pick out that I don't have enough capacity. Therefore, maybe to service this contract, I would need to take from capacity I would have used for my current business. But then I would say, what would then be the lost contribution from that capacity I've taken away from existing business? Then that will come to as a cost. So let's go back to our scenario where we're given information around this ZRIU contract. So starting on this page. So ZRIU was South Africa and Kenya, 21st of April to 29 April, Sevens tournament. And ZRIU provide accommodation and meals for the visiting teams. ZRIU has therefore approached 21st the request for accommodation rooms and meals to cater for their guests. So this way conclude that this was a once-off transaction. They don't want these rooms on a recurring basis. And I'm also given team size. South Africa 22 players, Kenya 12 players. What room do they want? Double standard rooms, sharing. So these guys, they wanted double standard rooms. So sharing, what is it telling me? It's a double. Double is equal to what? 2. So it means each room is going to have 2 players. So how many rooms does South Africa require? They require 11 rooms. Some of us will miss that aspect. Kenya, they want single standard rooms. So single, 1 player per room. So how many rooms do they require? 12 rooms. Meals, breakfast and supper. Kenya, they only want breakfast. Very important. So moving on. I'm also told they require the accommodation for 9 days South Africa, 11 days Kenya. And all these things are very important when I'm trying to determine whether I've got existing capacity for this. So bed and breakfast, a single standard room. These are our standard rates. Happy. But we are told that the 2 teams are expected to be hosted in one hotel location. On average, each hotel has 60% single rooms, 30% double, 10% single executive. And 21st expects 70% occupants. And I know in the first pages of the case study, we gave you information around the average rooms per each hotel. And then I'm sure in the scenario we're told that each hotel is got an average of 69 rooms. So based on this, you could calculate how many single standard rooms does each hotel have, how many double standard rooms does each hotel have, how many single executive rooms does each hotel have. And why am I worried about this? Because I want to know, do we have the capacity to service this order? And we are told current occupants 70%. So it means at any given point in time, we will expect that on average, 70% of our hotel rooms will be occupied by guests. So it means to service this contract, free capacity is 30%. Therefore, you expect them to calculate for this contract how many single standard rooms were required, how many double standard rooms were required, versus the free capacity. Excess, you then ask, if we are not able to meet the full order, what then should we do? Should we take rooms from capacity that is currently being used to save this 70%? And the moment we do that, I then need to calculate the opportunity cost. What is opportunity cost? The lost contribution from the room that I've taken from the current 70% capacity to service this particular order. And that was what we expected you to do in terms of then coming up or determining whether or not we're going to make a profit from this order. Then another challenge we noticed was interpretation of information. Inspire this sentence. We're told that ZRIU is prepared to pay $110 bed and breakfast, $150 bed and breakfast, and $30 for a single room, double room and supper respectively. So a single room, ZRIU is going to pay 110 bed and breakfast. This is what the Kenyans wanted. Double room, ZRIU is going to pay 150, which is what the South African wanted. In addition, the South African wanted supper, $30, times the number of players. So for SAPA, you're calculating the number of players. Then for the rooms, double rooms, South Africa has got 22, but they want 11 rooms because players will be sharing. Kenya would want 1 player per room. So they would want the number of rooms that would equate to the number of players. Then here, the other information here is going to assist you to be able to identify which costs were relevant for the purposes of determining the contribution coming up from this special order, applying your relevant costing principles. So in a nutshell, students who struggled with these questions failed to apply relevant costing principles, failed to interpret the information in this scenario. How many rooms were required by the SA teams? Double sharing. How many rooms were required by the Kenyan team? Single rooms and the number of players. Did we have capacity to take this order? If not, where were we going to get the excess capacity? And that capacity, is it being utilized to save the 70% occupants? If the answer is yes, then it triggers an opportunity cost. So in conclusion, H1 wanted you to be able to say, for me to determine whether the price offer is fair, what should I calculate? Am I going to make a profit? But which profit? Contribution. Why? Because this is a short-term decision. Fixed costs are irrelevant. So I'm more worried about the variable costs I'm going to incur in servicing this contract, which is why we wanted you to determine the contribution. Then H2 was saying, because in H1 you focused more on the quantitative analysis. Over and above, let's say in H1 we are saying we are going to make a positive contribution. Taking up this offer, what else should we consider? So points such as, are we going to get any repeat business? Should the rugby ZRU host the future tournaments? Are we going to get a repeat business? Brand equity, by hosting these international teams, what does it mean to our brand equity? So you're now looking at these other considerations in terms of whether or not we should service this contract. So I would say here the performance from the mid-year was quite disappointing, because from an examiner's perspective, we thought that the question was on the medium to easy. However, for those who failed to apply themselves and interpret the information in the case study, they took a simplistic approach in calculating the contribution without taking into account opportunity costs, without taking into account whether or not we had the capacity to service this contract. So I hope this revision has been helpful in clarifying what we expected to have done in addressing this requirement. Thank you.